My name is Denise Walker, and for 2 years, a customer photographed me every single shift. For 2 years, I watched him raise his phone, point it at my body, and click. For 2 years, I told my manager about it. And for 2 years, my manager said the same thing. You're in public, Denise. There's no law against taking pictures. But there was a law. And when I finally discovered where those photographs were going, I understood why my manager had been so quick to dismiss me. What I found behind that screen wasn't just creepy, it was criminal, it was organized, and it involved people I never would have suspected. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because what happened at Riverside Grill changed everything I thought I knew about trust, about protection, and about the men who were supposed to keep me safe. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? What city or country? Write it in the comments below. And while you're there, I'd love to know, have you ever felt watched at work? Have you ever had someone make you uncomfortable with their phone, their camera, their eyes, and been told to just ignore it? Share your experience. You're not alone. And your story matters. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a friend, a sister, a daughter who works in the service industry, send them this video. They deserve to know they have options. Now, let me tell you what happened at Riverside Grill. I had worked at Riverside Grill for 3 years. It was one of those classic American diners on the edge of town, the kind with red vinyl booths that squeaked when you slid across them, chrome accents that caught the afternoon light, and a jukebox in the corner that nobody ever used anymore. The smell of coffee and bacon grease hung in the air from opening to closing. The bell above the door chimed every time a customer walked in, and after 3 years I could tell who was coming just by the rhythm of their footsteps. The food was decent. The tips were better. And for the most part, I loved my job. I loved the chaos of a Friday night rush, when every table was full and the kitchen was firing. I loved the regulars who knew my name. I loved earning my own money, building my own future. But there was one thing I didn't love. His name was Gerald Hutchins, and he came in every Wednesday and Saturday without fail. He was in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and watery blue eyes that never seemed to blink. He always wore the same brown corduroy jacket, and he always sat in the same booth. Booth 7, right by the window, right where he could see the entire restaurant, right where he could see me. The first time I noticed him taking pictures, I thought I was imagining things. It was a busy Saturday night, and I was rushing between tables with plates stacked up my arms, balancing a coffee pot in one hand. I glanced toward booth 7 and saw him holding his phone up, the camera pointed directly at me. I froze for just a second. Our eyes met across the crowded dining room. He lowered the phone slowly and smiled. A thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just checking my messages," he said. I nodded and kept moving. I told myself I was being paranoid. Customers looked at their phones all the time. It didn't mean anything. People don't just sit in restaurants photographing strangers. That would be crazy. But it happened again, the next Wednesday, and the Saturday after that, and the Wednesday after that. Every single time I passed his booth, his phone was up. Every single time I bent down to clear a table, I could feel his camera following me like a cold finger tracing down my spine. Every single time I turned around, there he was, watching, clicking, smiling that same thin smile that made my skin crawl. I started to dread his visits. I would check the reservation book before my shift, hoping to see that booth 7 was taken by someone else. But it never was. Gerald always called ahead. Gerald always got his booth. And Gerald always got me. But that was just the beginning. What I didn't know yet was that Gerald's photographs were going somewhere. And the place they were going would lead me to discover something much darker than one creepy customer with a camera phone. After a month of this, I finally worked up the courage to say something to my manager, Tom. Tom Brennan had been running Riverside Grill for 15 years. He was in his early 60s, a big man with a beer belly and a gray mustache. He liked to call himself old school, a man who understood how the real world worked. Looking back now, I realize he was reading me all along. He just wasn't reading what I thought he was reading. "Tom, I need to talk to you about a customer," I said during a slow Tuesday afternoon. He was counting receipts at the bar, barely looking up. The ceiling fan clicked overhead in the silence. "What about?" "Gerald Hutchins. The guy who sits in booth 7. He keeps taking pictures of me." Tom's hand stopped moving. He looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something flickered in his eyes, just for a second, before his face settled into concern. "Pictures?" "Yeah. Every time I walk by his table, he has his phone out. I can see the camera pointing at me. He's photographing me, Tom. I'm sure of it." Tom sighed heavily. He set down the receipts and crossed his thick arms over his chest. "Denise, have you actually seen him take a picture of you? Like, have you seen the flash go off? Have you seen yourself on his screen? His phone doesn't use a flash, but I can see him pointing it at me. I can see him pressing the button. I know what I'm seeing." "So, you think he's taking pictures?" "I know he's taking pictures." Tom shook his head slowly, the way you'd shake your head at a child who was afraid of monsters under the bed. "Look, sweetheart, I understand you're uncomfortable. I do. But here's the thing you need to understand. You're in a public place. There's no law against taking pictures in public. If he was touching you, that would be different. If he was saying inappropriate things to your face, that would be different. But taking pictures?" He shrugged his big shoulders. "There's nothing I can do about that. My hands are tied. But it's creepy. It makes me feel unsafe. I feel like I'm being hunted. I get it. I really do. But Gerald has been coming here for years, long before you started. He spends good money, tips well, never causes any real trouble." Tom picked up his receipts again, signaling that the conversation was wrapping up. "Just ignore him. Don't make eye contact. Walk a different route to your tables. Eventually he'll get bored and find someone else to look at." I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to say something else, something helpful, something that acknowledged what I was feeling. But he just went back to counting his money, and I understood that the conversation was over. That night, I went home to my small apartment and stood in the doorway for a long time without turning on the lights. Everything looked normal, but I didn't feel normal. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my work uniform, and I cried until my eyes burned. Not because Tom had been mean. He'd been dismissive, which was somehow worse. He'd made me feel like I was the problem, like I should just smile through it and be grateful. I called my mother that night. "Maybe he's right, honey," she said finally. "Some men are just like that. They don't mean anything by it." I hung up feeling more alone than before, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Not just uncomfortable. Wrong. Like smelling smoke, but not being able to see the fire. Like hearing footsteps behind you on an empty street. Something was there. I just couldn't see it yet. And that feeling would turn out to be more right than I ever wanted it to be. For the next several months, I did exactly what Tom suggested. I ignored Gerald. I didn't make eye contact. I served his food as quickly as possible, said as few words as I could manage, and moved on to other tables. I walked the long way around the dining room to avoid passing his booth. I smiled my fake smile and pretended everything was fine, but nothing changed. His phone was always out. His camera was always pointed at me, and that smile, that knowing, satisfied smile that said he was getting exactly what he wanted never left his face. If anything, it grew wider. Like he knew something I didn't know. I started wearing longer aprons that covered more of my legs, looser shirts that hid my shape. I stopped bending down to pick things up when I was anywhere near his section. I would kick dropped silverware under tables rather than bend over within his line of sight. I changed my schedule so I could avoid working on Wednesdays and Saturdays, but Tom always found a reason to put me back on those shifts. "You're my best server, Denise. The customers love you. I need you on the busy nights. Can't someone else work booth 7? Can't you move him to a different section?" Tom's face hardened just a little. "He's been sitting in that booth for 5 years. I'm not going to tell a loyal customer where he can and can't sit. That's not how we do things here." Every time I asked, the answer was the same. And every time, something in my stomach twisted a little tighter. It felt like more than laziness, more than indifference. It felt like Tom was protecting Gerald. But I didn't understand why. But what I discovered next would change everything. And it started with a conversation I almost didn't have. Other servers had started to notice Gerald, too. My coworker Jasmine pulled me aside one evening in the break room. She was leaning against the vending machine, arms crossed, her voice low. "That guy in booth 7 gives me the creeps," she whispered. "He watches you like a hawk, like your prey." "I know. Have you said anything to Tom?" "Yeah, multiple times. He says there's nothing he can do. Public place. No law against looking. You know the speech." Jasmine rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might stick. "Of course he said that. Tom doesn't do anything unless it affects his bottom line." She paused, chewing her lip like she was deciding whether to say something. "You know, I heard something weird the other day. From Megan, who used to work here." My heart rate picked up. "What did you hear?" "She said Gerald and Tom go way back. Like, way back. They were in some kind of club together or something. She didn't know the details, but she said Tom always protected Gerald, even when other servers complained." "Other servers complained? About Gerald?" "Apparently, before your time, 3 or 4 girls over the years. They all said the same thing. The photographs, the staring, the creepy smile. And Tom always shut them down the same way." That night, I lay awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling. A club. Other servers. The same complaints. The same dismissals over and over again. It felt like smelling smoke, but not seeing fire. The heat was there. I could feel it, but I couldn't see what was burning. I started paying closer attention to Tom after that conversation, watching him the way Gerald watched me, and I started noticing things I'd never noticed before. The way Tom would glance at Gerald when I walked past, just a flicker of eye contact. The way Tom would schedule me for Gerald's shifts even when other servers were available. The way Tom's jaw would tighten when I complained, like I was being difficult. The way Tom and Gerald sometimes nodded at each other across the restaurant, just barely, like they were sharing a secret. One evening, I saw Tom walk past booth 7 and tap twice on the table. Gerald looked up from his phone and smiled. Tom kept walking without breaking stride. It could have been nothing. A regular greeting, a regular customer. But it didn't feel like nothing. Something was connecting these two men. Something I couldn't see. And whatever it was, it had been going on for years. I just needed to find out what. But the truth, when it came, would be worse than anything I'd imagined. It was a Tuesday night in October, about 14 months after I first noticed Gerald taking pictures. The leaves were changing outside, reds and golds swirling past my apartment window. I was at home, curled up on my couch with a cup of tea, scrolling through social media on my laptop. That's when a notification popped up that changed everything. Someone had tagged me in a post on a website I'd never heard of. The notification showed my name, my full name, along with the words, New content uploaded. My stomach dropped. The tea suddenly tasted like metal in my mouth. I sat there for a full minute, my cursor hovering over the link, my hand trembling slightly. Part of me didn't want to click. Part of me wanted to close the laptop and pretend I'd never seen it. But I clicked. And what I found made me physically sick. It was a website, a forum dedicated to what they called candid photography. The design was clean, almost professional, but there was nothing legitimate about what was inside. Photographs of women, hundreds of women, thousands maybe, taken without their knowledge or consent. Servers, cashiers, baristas, women at work, completely unaware that someone was photographing them. Categorized by location, rated by users, discussed in comment threads that read like product reviews. And there, with my photograph as the thumbnail, Riverside Grill Server D, Premium Collection. I clicked on it. My vision was blurring with tears, but I forced myself to look. There were hundreds of pictures of me. Hundreds. Dating back almost 2 years. Pictures of me walking between tables. Pictures of me bending over to set down plates. Pictures of me reaching up to grab glasses from the high shelf. Pictures of me from behind, from the side. Close-ups that made it very clear what the photographer had been focusing on. And the comments. God, the comments. Disgusting, degrading things written by strangers about my body. About what they wanted to do to me. About how they wished they lived close enough to visit Riverside Grill in person. They discussed me like I was a product on a shelf. They rated my body parts individually. They thanked the photographer, someone called Riverside Regular 47, for his dedication and his excellent angles. I ran to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left. But I wasn't done looking. Because I'd noticed something in the comments that I needed to understand. Something about an arrangement. Something about access. I wiped my mouth and went back to my laptop. I scrolled through the comments more carefully this time, looking for details. And that's when I found a conversation that made everything fall into place. Someone had asked Riverside Regular 47 how he managed to get such consistent, high-quality photographs without ever getting caught. How he always seemed to have the perfect angle. How his target never seemed to switch to other sections. His response made my blood turn to ice. I have an arrangement with the management. He makes sure she's always working my section on my days. I give him a cut of the premium subscriber fees. Everybody wins. I read it 3 times, 4 times, 5. Tom knew. Tom had always known. Tom wasn't just ignoring the problem. Tom wasn't just being dismissive. Tom was part of it. Tom was profiting from it. The man I'd gone to for help, the man who was supposed to protect his employees, had been selling access to me like I was merchandise. But that wasn't the worst of it. Because as I kept reading, as I followed the threads deeper into that forum, I realized that Gerald wasn't working alone, and Tom wasn't his only partner. What I discovered next would eventually bring down 17 men across 5 states. But first, I had to survive the longest night of my life. I didn't sleep that night. Not for a single minute. I sat in front of my laptop until the sky started turning gray outside my window, screenshotting everything I could find. Every photograph of me, every comment, every username, every conversation that mentioned arrangements or access or management cooperation. My eyes burned, my hands cramped. But I couldn't stop. Because I'd found something else in that forum. Other folders, other women, other restaurants. A whole network of men sharing photographs, sharing tips, sharing access. Restaurant managers, gym owners, coffee shop supervisors. Men in positions of authority who were supposed to protect the women working under them, instead selling them out to strangers on the internet. And some of the photographs weren't of adults. When I saw that, I had to stop. I had to close the laptop and sit in the dark for a long time, breathing slowly, trying not to fall apart completely. By the time the sun came up, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. I wasn't going to smile through it. I wasn't going to let Tom dismiss me one more time. I was going to burn it all down. I called in sick to work that morning. My voice was hoarse from crying, so that part was easy to fake. I have the flu, I told Tom over the phone. I can't come in. He sounded annoyed. It's Wednesday, Denise. You know we're busy on Wednesdays. Yes, I thought. Because Gerald comes on Wednesdays. Because you scheduled me for him. I'm sorry, I said, keeping my voice flat. I'll try to be back by Saturday. I had no intention of ever going back. After I hung up with Tom, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she specialized in workplace harassment cases. I found her through an online search, and when I explained my situation over the phone, she told me to come to her office immediately. I brought my laptop with all the screenshots. I brought a folder of every text message where Tom had scheduled me for Gerald's days. I brought my work schedules going back 18 months. I brought everything. Patricia looked at the evidence for nearly an hour without saying a word. Her face was completely still, but I could see her jaw tightening as she scrolled through the forum. When she finally looked up, her eyes were hard. This is worse than workplace harassment, she said quietly. This is criminal. The distribution of these images, the payment structures I'm seeing, the involvement of management, and especially these images that appear to involve minors, this is federal territory. So there is a law against it? Tom told me there wasn't. Patricia's lip curled slightly. Your manager lied to you. Repeatedly. Either he's completely ignorant of the law, which I doubt, or he was protecting himself and his friend. Based on what I'm seeing, I'd bet on the second option. She leaned forward. Here's what we're going to do. First, we preserve all this evidence through proper legal channels. I have a forensic expert who can do that. Second, we file a police report. What Gerald has been doing constitutes voyeurism and stalking under state law, and the forum itself may violate federal statutes. Third, we prepare a civil case against the restaurant. Your employer had a legal duty to protect you from harassment. They didn't just fail that duty, they actively participated in it. Can they actually go to jail? Gerald and Tom? Gerald is going to prison. I'm almost certain of it. Based on what I'm seeing here, he's been running this operation for years, and some of these images are going to trigger mandatory minimum sentences. Patricia paused. Tom is more complicated. His involvement might be harder to prove in criminal court. But civilly? We have him dead to rights. His text messages scheduling you for Gerald's shifts, combined with those forum posts about their arrangement. He's finished. I nodded slowly, taking it all in. My hands had finally stopped shaking. One more thing, Patricia said. Do not go back to that restaurant. Don't call Tom. Don't contact any of your coworkers. Don't post anything on social media. If Tom suspects that you've discovered the forum, he'll destroy evidence. Gerald will delete his accounts. They'll close ranks and protect each other. So I just wait? You wait. And you trust me. We're going to get these people, all of them. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a strange kind of limbo. I told Tom I was still sick. He stopped calling after the first week. I stayed in my apartment, jumping at every sound, checking and rechecking the locks on my doors. Patricia worked fast. Her forensic expert preserved the forum data before anyone could delete it. We identified 12 other victims through the website, women from restaurants and coffee shops across 5 states. Patricia reached out to them one by one. 7 agreed to join the case. All of them had reported concerns to their managers. All of them had been dismissed. All of them had been told some version of, "There's no law against looking." On November 15th, we filed a police report. On November 18th, At 6:47 in the morning, detectives executed a search warrant at Gerald Hutchins' home. What they found was worse than anything we'd imagined. Gerald had been doing this for over a decade. He had thousands of images stored across multiple hard drives, not just candid photographs from restaurants, hidden camera footage from changing rooms and bathrooms, images taken through windows, and mixed in with all of it, photographs of girls who were clearly underage. Gerald was arrested that morning. He tried to delete files when he heard the knock on the door, according to the police report. He didn't have enough time. The charges included voyeurism, stalking, distribution of intimate images without consent, and possession of illegal material involving minors. He was denied bail. 2 days later, I was sitting in Patricia's office when my phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. OMG, police just arrested Tom, right in the middle of dinner rush. Everyone is freaking out. I called her immediately. She answered in a whisper, hiding in the walk-in freezer. It was insane, she said, her voice shaking. 2 cops walked in, went straight to the bar where Tom was doing his receipts, and told him he was under arrest. He kept saying there must be some mistake, that he hadn't done anything. They put him in handcuffs in front of a full restaurant. Mrs. Patterson from the church group was sitting right there. She dropped her fork in her soup. I listened to Jasmine describe the scene, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just tired. Bone deep, tired. And something like relief. Tom was charged with conspiracy to commit voyeurism, facilitation of workplace harassment, and accessory to the distribution of illegal images. The last charge was the serious one. It connected him to the forum, to the money, to everything. His bail was set at $200,000. Last I heard, he couldn't make it. But the arrests were only the beginning. Over the following weeks, the investigation expanded. Gerald's forum was connected to a network spanning multiple states. The FBI got involved. They traced payment records, server logs, user accounts. By December, 17 men had been arrested. 6 were restaurant managers who had facilitated access. The news called it the biggest voyeurism network bust in state history. Patricia filed our civil lawsuit. The restaurant's lawyers reached out to discuss settlement immediately. They're scared, Patricia told me. They're offering $300,000 to settle, with a non-disclosure agreement. I thought about it for a long moment. $300,000 would change my life. I could pay off my student loans, put a down payment on a house, start over somewhere new where nobody knew my face. But it would also mean silence. It would mean Tom and Gerald's names fading from memory. It would mean other women never hearing this story. No NDA, I said, and I want policy changes, mandatory harassment training, third-party reporting systems, consequences for managers who ignore complaints. Patricia smiled. Then we go to trial. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed every single day with reporters, activists, and people who had seen the news coverage. I testified for 2 full days. I described every time I had complained to Tom. I read his dismissive responses out loud while the jury listened. I showed them the forum posts where he bragged about his arrangement. I showed them the photographs, the hundreds of photographs of me that had been shared with thousands of strangers without my knowledge or consent. Gerald's defense attorney tried to argue that I had no reasonable expectation of privacy in a public restaurant. The judge shut that down immediately. The issue before this court is not whether the plaintiff was in a public space. The issue is whether the defendant engaged in a systematic pattern of harassment, whether he distributed images without consent, and whether he did so with the knowing assistance of the plaintiff's employer. The evidence suggests the answer to all 3 questions is yes. Tom's attorney argued that his client was simply a restaurant manager who didn't understand the legal implications. My client is a simple man. He didn't know what Gerald was doing with the photographs. The prosecutor played Tom's forum messages, the ones where he discussed which servers were worth photographing, the ones where he joked about how easy it was to dismiss complaints from paranoid girls. Tom sat very still while his own words filled the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts. Riverside Grill was ordered to pay $250,000 in compensatory damages, split among the 8 women who had joined the lawsuit. Tom was personally liable for an additional $100,000. The restaurant was required to implement comprehensive harassment training and establish third-party reporting. But the criminal cases delivered the real justice. Gerald was convicted on multiple felony counts: the voyeurism, the stalking, the distribution charges, and 3 counts related to images of minors. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. He'll be on the sex offender registry for the rest of his life. Every job application, every apartment search, every new neighbor who looks up his name, he'll carry what he did forever. Tom was convicted of conspiracy and facilitation. He received 3 years in prison and 5 years of probation. His restaurant management license was revoked permanently. The last I heard, he's working as a stock clerk at a warehouse outside of town, far from customers, far from servers, far from anyone he could hurt. Riverside Grill closed 4 months after the verdict. The owners tried to sell the building, but nobody wanted a restaurant with that reputation. It sat empty for a while, a for-lease sign gathering dust in the window. I drove past it a few weeks ago. It's a tire shop now. Quick lube and tires. The red vinyl booths are gone. Booth 7, where Gerald sat twice a week for years photographing me, is now a display rack for motor oil. I parked across the street for a moment, just looking. The lunch rush would have been starting. I could almost hear the bell above the door chiming, but there was no bell, no plates, no Tom. Just tires and strangers who had no idea what happened here. I started my new job 6 months after the trial ended. A restaurant called Maple Street Kitchen. Smaller than Riverside Grill. Quieter. Family-owned. The manager, a woman named Ruth, pulled me aside on my very first day. "I read about your case," she said. Her voice was firm but kind. "I want you to know something. What happened to you will never happen here. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. I don't care if they're irregular. I don't care how much they tip. I don't care if they've been coming here for 50 years. Your safety matters more than their money. Do you understand?" I almost started crying right there in the dining room. "Thank you," I managed to say. Ruth patted my shoulder. "You were brave to speak up. A lot of people wouldn't have. But because you did, other women are safer now. Managers are paying attention now. That matters more than you know." I got a letter last month from a server in another state. A customer had been photographing her for months. Her manager told her the same thing Tom told me. "You're in public. Nothing we can do." But after seeing my case, she knew that wasn't true. She filed a complaint. She contacted a lawyer. Last week, the customer was banned permanently. "You gave me the courage to fight back," she wrote. I realized I wasn't alone. I framed that letter. It hangs on my wall now. Because that's what this was about. Not revenge. Not money. It was about showing other women that they don't have to accept harassment as part of the job. They don't have to smile through it. There's always something you can do. Document everything. Talk to a lawyer. Tell your story. Gerald thought he could photograph me forever. Tom thought he could dismiss me forever. They were wrong. My manager said I was in public. My lawyer said otherwise. And in the end, my lawyer was right. Riverside Grill is a tire shop now. Gerald is in prison. Tom is stacking boxes in a warehouse, and I am standing in the dining room of Maple Street Kitchen, taking orders, living my life, finally free. They thought they could watch me without consequences. But in the end, I was the one watching them, and I watched them fall.